Did you see your friend?
I'm not sure which of the Rasas I've got going yet. Yes, I did. I have to, I guess, be a little bit quicker earlier if I want to be the one to do the guessing. I'll send you a picture of my work this morning. The Lord's work.
ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ
शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। मनो हि द्विविधं प्रोक्तम् Same thing with the pronunciation. Of course, the chanting class is tomorrow, but there's no need to wait till then. So, he is a short vowel E followed by a conjunct consonant. Mano hidvividham proktam.
Mano hidvividham proktam.
Shuddham cha shuddhameva cha.
Shuddham cha shuddhameva cha.
Ashuddham kama sankalpam.
Ashuddham kama sankalpam.
Shuddham kama vivarjitam.
Shuddham kama vivarjitam.
Together. Mano hi dvividham proktam. Shuddham cha shuddhameva cha. Ashuddham kama sankalpam. Shuddham kama vivarjitam. Very good. And the Sanskrit is simple enough. And we already translated last time. What was the translation? See, now you have been studying Sanskrit for 1 week. This should be very simple. Correct? Yeah. The mind is proktam, is said to be of two varieties, twofold, mind. Okay? Very, very easy translation. Vividham, two kinds, two categories. Proktam is said. By who is the question? But presumably people who know about the mind. Jnanis, knowledgeable people. People who know what is what have said that there are two kinds of minds. Mind is twofold. One is called pure. The other one is called impure. That's all that the first one says. Oh, so shall we go to the next one? No, not yet. Because this is again like a bombshell. What do you mean pure? What do you mean impure? I thought I had only one mind. Now you're saying, I have two minds. Now I am of two minds about what to do with all this, And so, therefore, we have to see why the Upanishad begins in this particular way. It is an upaya. Upaya means it is a way of, like when somebody wants to get your attention, like for example, a hoarding, an ad. It has to be catchy. The colors have to stand out, the wordings have to stand out. It cannot go into a lot of details about something, about the product. It will just say, so that it catches your attention and the person wakes up and, enters the Upanishad, so to speak. It is some kind of an attention getting attempt. So that's why it begins like this. One reason. Second reason is because it begins on a note of akanksha. What is the translation of akanksha? Mystery, an expectation. Mind is of two kinds, pure and impure. Wait a minute. Nobody likes the word impure. Ashuddham, who likes the word? Nobody likes ashuddha, to be called impure, and to say that the mind is impure or the mind is pure. What? Nothing in between? No, only two kinds of minds, pure and impure. This is not something to stop at, correct? This is something to continue. So it creates a prarojana. What is prarojana? A taste. It's like reading a Agatha Christie book, a mystery book. And it creates a, for the shrotas, for the listeners, it creates an akanksha. What is an akanksha? An expectancy. An expectancy, okay, what's going to happen next? And what is pure, what is impure? Where do I fall into this? Because that is what I'm most interested in. I'm not interested in the neighbor's mind. Even if I'm interested in the neighbor's mind, I know that person is good for nothing. I'm interested in where does my mind fall, correct? That is what I want to know. So it creates an expectancy. First is it grabs the attention. It's an attention, it's a catchy thing. And then it creates an expectancy. And the third thing is that it snares the attention of the listener, the shrota. Why? Because it's all about oneself. One's mind is so intimate to one that one would like to know more about it. And so the entry point here is not Jagat or Ishvara, it is from the standpoint of the Jiva. And such texts that talk about the reality from the standpoint of the person are always beloved texts. Like even the Bhagavad Gita. It's all about me, me, me. I like that, And so these are the reasons from the outset why this is an important beginning. And then the Upanishad is not alone in talking about the mind. Which other Upanishad begins with the mind? Kena Upanishad. Right away it says, Kene shitam preshitam patati manaha. Sent by whom, impelled by whom, controlled by whom, decided by whom does the mind fall into various thoughts and various objects. First it talks about the mind, then it talks about the prana. Kena prana prathamam praiti yuktaha. Kene shitam vacham imam vadanti. Then the speech. Where does the speech originate from? Who controls the speech? Who controls, but of course the speech is a product of the mind. So therefore the mind comes first. And then what is the answer? Shrotrasya shrotram, manaso manaha. This is what is the response. But this is another Upanishad that begins with the mind. You can see how important the mind is. And then we have a statement, in three other Upanishads talking about the mind. One, and sometimes if you don't look at it properly, it could appear contradictory. Manasa eva idam aptavyam. Upanishad number 1, Kathopanishad says that.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
So, I'll repeat. Manasa eva idam aptavyam. Okay? So, Manasa eva idam aptavyam. Meaning, this knowledge, idam jnanam, this knowledge has to be gained with the help of the mind alone. This knowledge has to be gained with the help of the mind.
I didn't turn off the stove.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So, this knowledge has to be gained with the help of the mind alone. Manasa eva idam aptavyam. And then another Upanishad, again the Kena Upanishad says, Yat manasana manute. That which is not an object of the mind, this knowledge is not an object of the mind. Seemingly it looks like a contradiction. And then the Taittiriya Upanishad says some same thing. Yato vacho nivartante apraapya manasa saha. Where the mind beats a retreat along with its friend, the speech, having been completely, unsuccessful about describing that totality, because it is not an object, it cannot be objectified. And so there is a abiding presence of the discussion of the mind in the Upanishads. And the mind, is something which is dwelt upon because of the fact that it has potential and it is of some use. But first, it has to be what? It has to be disconnected first because it's badly wired. It has to be disconnected and then it has to be reconnected. That is the whole, kind of a thing. It has to be disconnected from what and reconnected to what is the subject matter of the Amrita Bindu Upanishad. But even before we go to this, verse, this mantra, a few things to talk about is the question of what constitutes the mind. First of all, where is the mind? Where is it? If you say point to the spleen, you can say it's over there. Point to the pancreas, it's over here. Point to the liver, kidneys, heart, you can point to various things, brain, hopefully, and you can point to various, parts. Mind. Where is the mind located? You have to say never mind, correct? No location. Why? Ati sukshmatvat. Because of its extreme subtlety. So it is a subtle organ. Can you call it an organ? Not really. It is a subtle karana. It is a subtle way in which certain processes of thinking, feeling, etc. Keep happening, but you don't know where it is located. Sometimes you say mind, sometimes you say mind. Most of the time, never mind. That's how it is, correct? And so, what is this mind? In English, of course, we don't have a definition. What is the mind? There is no specific definition. But in Sanskrit, we have made the mind into an art form, very specific definition. The mind includes the following. First is called Manas itself. And here the whole thing is called Manas, but Manas has a specific within this categorization, manas has a specific role, and that manas has to do with a vacillatory faculty. You know, did I turn off the stove or not? Did I lock the door or not? Did I do this or not? Okay, that is in the past. In the future too, one can get caught up. Should I do this or not? Should I go for this or should I go for that? And then you keep asking everybody. You know, nobody wants to be implicated in your life choices, okay? Yeah, you have to make them. Should I study Vedanta or not? You know, why don't you come with me to a class and then you can decide for me whether I should go into this full time, part time or no time. You know, what should I do? So the person brings a friend to class and the friend enjoys the talk and you know, but then is very careful, very diplomatic friend. Because what else? I mean, you know, if one keeps asking for advice on every corner, then all the friends become diplomatic because nobody wants to be involved in these kinds of, you know, decisions. Well, on the one hand, you know, this is a good knowledge. I think you should go for it. But on the other hand, you know, once you go into this, and after that, what will you do for a living? You know, you know, this was the situation when we asked the question in the 1 month course, do you want a certificate? And most of you said, what am I going to do with that? You can give me one, but what am I going to do with it? It's, you know, this is a very wonderful question. And most of the people said, we don't want a certificate, we don't care. And a few of them with a sense of humor said, what am I going to do with it? Where am I going to put it? And similarly, if you write in your CV, I have self-knowledge, you know, nobody is going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. They don't want to, you know, they're not interested in self-knowledge. Do you have knowledge of how to, you know, how to do this job, whatever you are listening? That you tell, you know. And so like this is the, you know, so you ask the friend, should I go in fully into Vedanta or should I just, you know, skim the surface? And the friend diplomatically says, I think you should do both. How? This is what is called Sankalpa Vikalpatmakam. The person cannot decide, even if you paid them to decide, they cannot decide. You know, that is how it is. That faculty, when that faculty is raging, it's called manas. Okay? The whole thing is also called manas, don't get confused. But within that manas, there are four things, and one of the things, the vacillating aspect of the mind is called manas. Then there is the faculty of feelings, correct? Yeah. Sad, bad, mad, rad, fad, all this. These are feelings, fleeting, but they are there in the form of thoughts and they calcify, you know, and the feelings are called chittam. So now we have manas, which is the vacillatory thing, faculty, the mind with reference to its faculty to vacillate, its proclivity to vacillate and not make up its mind is called manas. The mind from the standpoint of its emotive function is called chittam. And the decisive faculty which says, I'm going to go for this, regardless of what you think, because it is correct and right for me. What is that called? Buddhi. Thank God, finally. Some hope. Yeah. And that buddhi has to be, that buddhi also can come under the spell of the manas and start to be misled. And so it's very important to be able to direct it in the right place with the help of meditation, discipline, prayer, for the buddhi to walk in a straight line. Very important. So that buddhi often is translated as intellect, the faculty of intellection, the faculty of decision making, the decisive quality called buddhi. And then the one says, all these belong to me. Who's that? Ahankara. I notion, the I notion that owns up the vacillating fellow, that owns up the touchy-feely fellow, that owns up the decisive fellow, and the one who says, I'm the karta of all of them, I'm the bhokta of the chittam, I'm the karta of the buddhi, all this. The one who identifies all this as belonging to me is called ahankara. Aham, I, kara, ness. I-ness, I notion. Okay? Yeah. So these four in Sanskrit constitute the mind. And then when it says that manohid vividham proktam, the mind is said to be of two kinds, a twofold mind, pure and impure, then we wonder which one, which of these faculties is the Upanishad referring to? Where is the impurity possible? Is it at the level of the vacillation? Of course. Is it at the level of the buddhi, the nishchayatmika? Is it at the level of the, what else is there? The ahankara? Is it at the level of the feelings? Yes, 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 yes. All those areas. Correct? And so, this is something which is very, very interesting, because the word manas comes from man, to think. And so regardless of whether it is talking of the faculty which vacillates, the faculty that feels, the function of being able to decide and the intellect, or the I notion, all of them have one thing in common. What is that? They are all based on thought. In fact, the ahankara is there. Ahankara, sometimes in English called ego. Why? How do you know it is there? Again, where is it located? How do you know it is there?
I have an identity, no matter how wrong it is, and I just know it.
Yeah. So, here perhaps one can say with caution, I think, therefore I am, with regard to the ahankara. Maybe that's what Descartes thought. That's just a joke. But really speaking, on one level, all these four, components of the mind are what is the sutra? What is that connection that goes through them? It is the presence of thought. So how do you know ahankara is there? Because it's all about me, me, me. And that ahankara owns up. This is me, this is mine, that's also mine. And what about that thing? Not yet mine. The whole world is vividham proktam from the standpoint of the ahankara. Mama and na mama yet. Mine and not yet mine. Meaning soon I will make it mine. Right now it's not yet mine. Everything is like that. And so the I notion is based on the I owning up that I thought, which is what? The Sakshi. Listen carefully. What is that Sakshi? The Sakshi who says, I am, I am, I am. That self-evident witness consciousness, correct? That self-evident witness consciousness which says, I am, I am, I am, I am. This fellow called ahankara owns it up and identifies with that I thought and says, this I am, I am, I am is me. And what is this me? The one who identifies with that I notion, the I thought, the one who identifies that I thought with the body, And how do you identify the I thought with the body? That too with the help of another thought. How else? It's all thought world. The whole thing is a thought world, born, thought world sustained, thought world resolved, business, the whole thing. So the I am is already there, correct? I am is self-existent. Who told this ahankara to say this I am is me? And what is this me? This I am is connected to this body, because the I am is coming from this area. It's not coming from that stove over there, or from that book, or from that staircase, or from that room, or from that window. The I am is connected somehow. It's coming from this region. This awareness seems to be coming from this region, and this awareness, this I consciousness, seems to be associated with this body, mind, sense complex. All of them is me. This is me. So where is all this? In the very rich and infinite thought world, correct? So the I am, which is not really a thought, is made into a thought. And that thought is connected to the body, mind, sense complex thought. And all of them are strung together like a beads on a string. And then it has a magic of becoming something huge. Then you go to the social security office and get a social security number, because now it is all me. This is me. And how is this me defined? This me and I am is defined by not me, not me, not me. By a strange process of sifting around. So I carve a little, identity for myself by disidentifying with all the other bodies in the room. I'm not that, I'm certainly not that, I'm not house, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm neither anything animate nor inanimate, things that surround me. I am just this much alone. You see that is all resting on a thought or a series of thoughts. Very interesting. So the ahankara has played its role. Then the emotive faculty says, that doesn't feel good. Correct? Then the buddhi says, buddhi means the intellect says, I think we should do something about this. I think it's high time we should do something about it. It doesn't feel good that I'm only this much. How can that be possible? So if I'm only this much, then why do I want so much? This is the manas. The vacillating fellow says, but I want that too. I want this too. Oh, but do I really want it? No, I think I want it. And so then the buddhi says, wait a minute. Something is going on here. There is a litany of thoughts, and these thoughts are all very miraculously strung together. And then when you see the beads, you don't see the string, and it all looks so tightly, it looks real, correct? We forget that the whole thing is based on thoughts that are momentary. Thoughts are momentary, kshanika vrittayah. So they are kshanikaha, they are all momentary. And so on these momentary thoughts, based on these momentary thoughts, we lead our lives. One leads one's lives based on a string of momentary thoughts, and then somehow it becomes real. And somehow it becomes real, and then the sad thing is that it all leads to what? A feeling of finitude. This is not okay. Something is wrong over here. So you see, there is a whole kind of a thing happening, a process of thinking. And that process of thinking is divided into two. And this process of thinking, which we are talking about here, which we just talked about, comes under Shuddha or Ashuddha? Ashuddha, until the buddhi enters and says we should do something about it. Perhaps that is Shuddha. That's why it's called Shubha Ichha. Auspicious thought, auspicious desire. But the rest of it is what is that? Not good news. Why? Because each thing, I'm putting myself in a cage. First I get into this cage for my safety, and then I start crying that I can't come out. That whole story we talked about earlier, let me in, and then what? Let me out. Because I can't bear to be in, I need to be out. Oh, but now I'm lonely, let me back in. And so, this whole way in which the whole thing sort of is closing in completely. It's all a series of thoughts. Stone walls do not a prison make, a poet wrote. Nor do the bars of iron bars of a cage. Nor do the iron bars of a cage and stone walls do not a prison make. How is the prison made? The prison is made of what is called sankalpa. Kalp, to imagine. Sankalp, to imagine creatively. To make the unreal real. This is what the whole thing is. And so, one thinks oneself to sadness, and one thinks oneself to the feeling of bondage. And that is described, and that is called Ashuddhi. Correct? And so then what is Shuddha, what is Ashuddha? That is described in the next verse. Let us read that. A very famous verse, and Pujya Swamiji used to quote it a lot. Wonderful, wonderful verse. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho bandhaya vishayasaktam muktam nirvishayam smritam mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho bandhaya vishayasaktam muktam nirvishayam smritam. Yeah, very oft quoted verse, at least the first line, and very beautifully put. And again it is talking about a lot of things. This is a very packed series of verses, at least in the beginning. So, mana eva manushyanam karanam. Again, a very simple Sanskrit. The mind alone is the karanam, the cause of what? Bandha mokshayoho, of bondage and freedom. The mind is the cause of the bars of the cage. The mind is the cause of the escape from the cage also. Correct? That's what it is saying. For who? Manushyanam. It is specifying. It is specifying why? Because the animals do not have a sense of bondage. At least not that we know of. The cat is happy being what it is. It does not say, I think I will go to India. Indian cat doesn't say, I'm going to America. I think I should go to the consulate and get a visa. Why should I get a visa? Because I just want to, see what all is happening over there. How the other cats live. I would like to see. I want to make lots of money and send it home. It is not interested in doing that. You know? And neither does it say, I think I don't feel very well, I should get a CAT scan, I should do this, I should do that. Nothing. It just lives as it is supposed to live. If you give it something to bat around, it's happy. Basic things, you know. And it is happy being who it is. A cat does not, spend a lot of time in guilt and hurt. I think, my owner does so much for me and I have been so ungrateful. I have been so bad. I'm a bad kitty. It doesn't think like that. It has no qualms. In fact, most of the times, the person owning the cat looks upon them as a can opener, life-size can opener. That's all it is. Door opener, can opener, things that, that's all it is. Cat doesn't spend a lot of time feeling guilty or feeling hurt. Oh, why did they do this? Nothing. And so this human problem of self-non-acceptance, and where the mind becomes both simultaneously a blessing and a curse, is not there with regard to the animals, because they live under the programmed laws of Bhagavan, of God. They don't defy the laws. Here, the mind is free, there is free will, and because of that, there is disaster. And that is what the second verse is about. Explaining this disaster called the human being, which is what? Manushya. Yes. Manushya also starts with mana, correct? Yeah. So manaha eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. The same mind. It's not that there are two minds. No, but the first one said there are two minds. No. The same mind is categorized as pure and impure, twofold. Okay, not two minds. So, the same mind is the cause of bondage, quote unquote, and the same mind is the cause of liberation, again, quote unquote. Oh, liberation is also as though? Yes. Oh, now this is really too much. I knew that bandha is as though. Bandha means what? The bondage is as though. I've heard you say it is notional, but moksha has to be real. Otherwise, why am I pursuing this so much? At all odd times, I'm waking up to catch a live class and I'm doing all these things. Why am I doing this? If moksha is not real, am I headed towards an unreal pursuit? Well, as though. If you want to show off Vedanta, you have to know a few words, buzzwords. What are they? As though. Definitely make it part of your vocabulary. You can impress your friends at parties. And then you can say rope snake. What else can you say? Pot clay. Gold ornament. And then what?
Ocean wave.
Wave, ocean. Yeah, very nice, very good. Ocean wave. And if you want to even be more sophisticated, ocean is but an ocean. You can borrow that. So, like this, you can impress your friends. So the same mind, the same blessed mind, on the one hand is constricting, and on the other hand is expansive. How is this possible? And how is the bondage? As though I can understand, but moksha has got to be real. What am I pursuing? Here is where we have to have a story. What is the story of the cows? You know the story of the cows, right? Cow story?
The ties?
Cow tie story. Yeah. but the other 50 people don't know, so I have to tell. So, one brahmachari was studying with a guru. Brahmachari means student. So, student is studying with the guru. This was in the olden days. And part of this apprenticeship involves taking care of cows. In more than one Upanishads, the cows are featured and the stable is featured. And the stable seva is also featured, and it is called stable seva because it makes the mind stable. That's why it's called stable. And so here this boy is taking care of cows, and there were a number of them, not one or two. There were 300 cows. And then one day what happened, in those days also, there was theft and everything. And somebody came and took away all the ropes with which the cows were tied down at night. And one or two you can manage, But 300 of them, how are you going to tie down? The brahmachari was, pulling out his tuft in clumps. And feeling very upset. And then, he went to the guru, and the guru said, "Don't worry, just pretend to tie them." He said, "What? Pretend to tie them? This guru doesn't know anything." The brahmachari was upset. This guru doesn't know anything. Pretend to tie them means what? Just go and pretend to tie them. This is all right. Guru is saying, let me try. So he just half-heartedly pretends to tie one. Immediately it settles down and starts chewing the cud, and the next, and the next, and the next. And now the brahmachari, the student, is convinced that the guru has a special mantra, special siddhi. Siddhi means some kind of a magic. And he says, forget Vedanta, I should get this magic. Yeah. Will be useful in raising a family, dealing with teenagers, sit, stay, you can just do that. And then, the guru sleeps very well at night, and this night is also no exception. From the guru's cottage, heartfelt snores are heard. Yeah. And the student is not able to sleep at all because the cows are all untied. And he keeps waking up every half an hour to check on them. Not a single one is moving. And then somehow he says, this guru is great. Some magic he has done. All the cows are just in place. He must be having direct connection with Bhagavan. Something is there, I have to get this. And so the next morning he says, he rubs his hands, washes his face, and his job is to take care of the cows and take them to the pasture and come back and make tea for the guru. But then none of them are getting up. None of them are getting up. And he says, come on. And they are not getting up. And then he just beats them playfully. And they are avoiding the beating this way, that way. They are still in place. They are not getting up. Then he says, oh, this guru must have a very strong and powerful mantra. I better find out what to do. And he goes to the guru and says, Guru, vocative, please release them from this mantra that you have them in thrall. You literally have held them all night. Thank you, release them. And the guru says, idiot, I haven't done anything. No, but they are not moving. Idiot, murkha, did you untie them? Oh, come on, they are not tied. Did you tie them or not yesterday? Yes, I pretended to tie. Okay, go pretend to untie them. So he pretends to untie one of them. It runs to the water. It is also sick of sitting there. He pretends to untie the second one. That one runs faster than the first. And so on. All 300 of them go to the pasture, go to the water. They are sick of being in the stables. And that is exactly how bandha is. That is exactly how moksha is. So who tied me up? Manaha eva. Yeah, my mind alone with all these ahankara, the buddhi following the ahankara, the mind, buddhi following the mind, and the feelings being enthroned, and feelings being put on the throne of permanency. All these ways in which I am like that cow, responsible for my own bondage and responsible for my own liberation. And the scenario which makes it even more fascinating is that there is neither bondage nor there is liberation. Where to go from here? We should just end the class here, really. Because this is really the final word. There is nothing. There is no bondage. And then, because there is no bondage, there cannot be liberation. Then what is this moksha you're talking about all the time? And why do we need Vedanta? We need Vedanta because like the cow, I have taken this bondage to be real. And the bondage is notional. Just like the cow was able to be tied up for the whole night without a piece of rope. No rope. No ropa, only aropa. Correct? Yeah. So the bondage is aropita, superimposed upon the mind, upon the I, that is naturally free of bondage. And once the bondage is superimposed, we have to bring in its opposite. What is that called? Liberation. Moksha. And we have to superimpose that also. That's what you have to do. Like the person who was bitten by the snake. What kind of snake? Snake of ignorance. That's how. So at first you have to just say, here is a nice balm, But isn't this a waste of time? That first you conjure up the bondage and then you conjure up the liberation. Yes, it is a waste of time. Oh, you mean you're accepting that it's a waste of time? Yeah. It's no more a waste of time than the malls and balls and other things that one conjures up. In fact, compared to that, this is a much better way to spend the time, because there what one is keeping on iterating is and underscoring is the bondage, which is made up. And because bondage is made up, we have to make up something called liberation, which is the antidote for bondage. But bondage, didn't you say in another class that it is ajnanam? Yes. So ajnanam is also as though? Yes. So jnanam is as though? Yes. I am as though? That I'll leave for you to decide. As though, okay? No, I cannot be as though. Abba, thank God. But if I am not as though, then what about this bondage liberation? Well, am I liberated or am I bound? Arey, I just told you you're neither bound nor are you liberated. You simply are. No, but if I am Satchidananda, how can I be bound? One person asks. Other person asks, but if I am a human being, how can I be liberated? Neither is Satchidananda bound, nor is the human being, nor is there need for liberation, really speaking. This is from the Paramarthika, from the standpoint of the Sat, from the standpoint of your nature, there is no bondage, no liberation. But from the standpoint of this tricky fellow called the mind, there is bondage. And this notion is taken to be real. So we have to bring in something else that from that same order of reality in order to remove this bondage. It's like when the foot, you walk outside barefoot and you get a thorn in the foot, in the sole of the foot. And to remove the thorn, you need another sharp object. You need another thorn or a pin, a safety pin. Correct? That's what it is. So, like destroys like here. That's all it is. Both are on the level of as though. And so, therefore, the second verse says, the first line, Manaha eva manushyanam. So only special teaching just for human beings, because the cats and dogs are fine. We are special. Why are we special? Because we need to see a specialist. Okay? That's the only reason we are special. No need to feel good about it. It's not a good special. Okay? Yeah. So the manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. How about, the bandha and moksha for the cow? I told you, there is no bandha, no moksha for the cow, because the cow doesn't have a complex centered on the self, centered on the I. And so therefore, here alone we are talking this problem. So manushyanam eva manaha. Karanam is the mind is the cause. Here we saw what the mind means. Mind means thoughts. Thoughts that attach to the I notion and that attach to the buddhi, that are identified with the buddhi, with the mind, with all those subtle aspects of the thinking process and the thinker. They are the cause of either bondage or liberation. So that means I have a choice? Apparently. Apparently you have a choice, because one can think oneself into bondage or one can think oneself into liberation. Oh, this is a little tricky, isn't it? How do I think myself to liberation? Should I keep saying I am free, I am free, I am free? No, not quite like that. What we distill the nature of the thoughts, the second line says. The second line says that, bandhaya, if you want to go the route of bondage, for the sake of bondage, fourth case, bandhaya manaha, you have to bring anuvritti, you have to bring the manaha down again in the second line. Bandhaya manaha vishayaihi asaktam. Asaktam, drenched in, sich to sprinkle, but here samantat, completely drenched by what? Vishayaihi, vishayasaktam, soaked in vishayas. What is vishaya? Sense objects. Vishinoti badhnati iti vishayaha. The word vishaya comes from vishinoti. The word wish, it's a particular derivation. Wish, to bind. So the word vishaya, objects connected to the senses, or just sense objects. Don't even go with sense objects, just objects. Vishayaha are called objects, and the objects bind. Binding objects. They're all having glue on all surfaces. They just stick. Or they are magnetic, so to speak. They just come and stick. Bandhaya vishaya saktam. Vishinoti badhnati iti vishayaha. Things that objects are things that bind. Things that bind are called objects in Sanskrit. And in the Ashtavakra Gita, Ashtavakra? Don't know sage Ashtavakra? Ashtavakra is a sage in India who had 8 bends in his body. 8 Vakra bends. And he wrote one Ashtavakra Gita, which is very difficult to read and understand. And so some kind of a congenital deformity, but nonetheless a great sage. How did he get this deformity? Because his mother, when he was a baby in the womb, the mother was sitting in Vedanta classes and going to a rishi and learning. And the rishi would ask questions, just like we have questions here. And she would give the wrong answer, and the baby would kick from inside to tell her this is wrong. Or the baby, when it got tired of kicking, would go like this, oh my God, and would develop a bend, So he had 8 deformities because she gave 8 wrong answers, much to the baby's chagrin, This is when he was still a fetus, that much he knew. You can see he was born a very knowledgeable baby. And then he wrote this booklet called Ashtavakra Gita, where he says he gives an advice in the beginning. And what does he say? He gives an advice to a king, I think. And then to the king he says that all the Vishayas, consider the Vishayas to be Visha. What is Visha? Poison. Consider the objects to be poison. And so, bandhaya vishaya saktam, a mind that is completely preoccupied with objects is called a bound mind, or a mind that is bound for bondage, leading to bondage. And then muktam, a free mind, muktam manaha, you have to bring the manaha down again. Muktam manaha nirvishayam smritam. Smritam, remembered, but here it is said. So, nirvishayam means free of objects is the mind that is liberated. Preoccupied with objects is the mind that is bound. Very problematic. Correct? So, when are you able to be without objects? When is the mind without objects? Yes. So that means tomorrow we should not wake up at all. Because nirvishayam smritam, what? Muktam. So when the mind is free of objects, it is liberated. Muktam. So that means, we become bears. Right? Why? We cannot bear it. Therefore, we hibernate forever or get into a coma. Food coma is enough. Eat too much and then, or you get into a permanently vegetative state, or you stop thinking. And then you are free. Because objects means, how does the mind relate to objects? Again in the form of thoughts. Because it keeps objectifying things. So, muktam nirvishayam smritam. Smritam means it is said. What is it said? That a free mind is that which is devoid of objects. Bandhaya vishaya saktam. And in order for that mind to be bound, it has to be completely drenched in, drowned in objects. Ayyayo, where to go? What to do? So obviously, if we take the surface level meaning, that means it is not possible to have a mind that is nirvishaya, free of thoughts. Nirvishaya means free of objects. Free of objects means free of thoughts. It is not possible unless, of course, one sleeps or one is in some kind of a samadhi. But in samadhi also you come back because you say, I have meditated so well. That becomes a thought. Or you say, I wish I could meditate more. That becomes, a vishaya. A wish becomes a vishaya. And so the command that is given here, first the mind is divided into 2 parts. Shuddham and Ashuddham, pure and impure. A pure mind is the one that is without objects. That's what is being told here. And then an impure mind is the one that is full of objects, full of thoughts. That means what shall we do now? You know, if this is what it is, we have to look a little deeper rather than the surface level meaning, which we will do on Friday, I think, yeah? Friday. Friday is the next class for this particular one, okay? Yeah. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Any questions are there? I can answer.
That the end was not pleased.
The
end was not pleasing.
End was not pleasing, yeah. That's why we have to meet on Friday. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the object is always there.
Object is always there.
Any situation, whether it's sleeping state.
Yeah, waking is the state, yeah.
Meditative state.
Right, non-meditative state. Yeah, everything.
It's always there.
It's always there. So therefore,
That's good end.
yeah. So that will always be there.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for writing that and making it a more bearable end. Yeah. So, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho. In the Valmiki Ramayana, Hanuman quotes this when justifying his action of visiting the women's quarters, since he has to search for Sita only in the women's quarters, and hence his mind is not drawn to them. Yeah, correct. Very nice. Very good. And what about memory? Yeah, memory is part of manas, correct. And buddhi also. Or if the memory is in the form of feelings, it is there in everything. So to be in this state, to view the objects as equal, we'll see more, yeah. We'll see more, yeah. Don't rush to the conclusion. Yeah. 4 components, ahankara, buddhi, manaha and chittam. 2 more. Yeah. Namaste. Nice to see you, Varsha. I'm glad you were able to take the class live. And what else? Am I missing any other questions? Yeah.
Varsha saying ingratitude here.
Who?
Varsha.
Varsha is there too? Yeah. Animals, don't they have manas? Yes, but they don't have, attachment to owners they may have. Yeah. But if the owner gives the animal to the, shelter, they will get attached to somebody at the shelter too. That's how it is. Yeah. They're much more adaptable. Okay.
He was asking, where is awareness?
Everywhere. Yeah, have a good week, James. Awareness is everywhere. Where is it not? Awareness is cognized in the mind, but it is everywhere. Any other questions here? Okay.